Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the Full10Yards NFL Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Full 10 Yards NFL Podcast. I'm your host Sam Moores, and we've got one hell of an episode for you today, and that's because it's this time of year again, everyone. The NFL is back in London this weekend, and we'll preview the game at Spurs in depth. We'll also hear from former Bills running back Christian Wade, obviously British, of course, and we'll look at the state of the AFC before picking against the spread in all the remaining Week 5 games. And joining me to do that is James Fotheringham, Full 10 Yards fantasy expert. First time on this pod. He's been on many other pods on the network, of course, so I'm sure you're all familiar with him. First time he's been on the pod since I've been the host anyway. So it's great to have you on, mate. Excited for the game this weekend?
Yes, any London game's always an experience, so sad that I won't be there, but I know plenty of people who will be, and I'm sure they're all going to have a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be there myself. So if you do happen to see me, don't feel free to say hello. I'll be with my dad this weekend. And yeah, it's always great to do it. And yeah, whenever I get invited to any of the NFL media events as well, it's always nice to do that as well, because it shows that we're really building something here, which is nice. And also it is really nice just to see and interact with people that you will see on the podcast normally in the flesh as well. So that is also really nice. Right, we'll kick off the podcast today with Thursday Night Football, where we were treated to one hell of a game last night. Falcons came from behind to win 36-30 in overtime. Cadell Hodges' walk-off touchdown on the first drive of overtime sealed the victory, moving both teams to 3-2. And wow, there's so much to unpack from this one. Starting with Kirk Cousins, who is known for struggling when the lights are bright. He now has back-to-back primetime wins after winning against the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. 509 yards, so not back-to-back because they played the Chiefs, but certainly two primetime wins this season. 509 yards, 4 touchdowns and an interception on the day where he was asked to throw the football 58 times. It's a really, really important win for the Falcons, who went all in this off-season. And yes, a weird day for their offense.
It was unreal. I mean, twice now they've had less than 5% chance of winning a game and come back and won it in unlikely circumstances. But yeah, as my background being more of a fantasy expert, waking up to multiple leagues where Kirk Cousins is sat there on waivers with 50 points on the board or equivalent in some scoring formats. And it's the fact that they had that good a game and Bijan Robinson was still a disappointment is kind of hilarious, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But it was very much a passing day with Drake London and Darnell Mooney absolutely rocking the show, really. Absolutely.
Really, really strange game. As you said, obviously the Bucs were leading for pretty much all of the second half. They're up by 2 scores of not much to go in the fourth quarter at all, really, in about a minute and a half. And despite being outgained by 200 odd yards, they were very much in this game. The Falcons won 30 more plays than the Bucs, but they only had 6 minutes more of possession. And that's because the Bucs just played some really efficient football, making the Falcons work for it. You mentioned it there, that the Bucs were the team that ran the ball well, not the Falcons, which we didn't expect. They had 87 more yards on the ground than the Falcons. They run the ball well. They have one of the best running backs in the league, and Bijan Robinson, as you said, he averaged 6 yards per carry in this game. It's not because it wasn't working. They just decided to give Kirk Cousins. They're behind. Yeah, he needs to throw, and then he took 63 passing snaps, which normally happens when a team is losing a game massively. They weren't losing this game massively, but just as always, the Falcons' offense, strange uses, especially for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, I think it was one of those where they'd realized that they were always in the game, but the passing game was what was working, and they were not going to go away from it, especially while they were still, kind of behind. And so Bijan wasn't like rubbish. It was just that the game script didn't necessarily go according to plan. But hey, even Kyle Pitts was cited this week, so all of a sudden it was bad. But yeah, they're saying the Bucs were not bad at all. It was one of those games that was just a classic, because it was one of those where you had one really solid, very well organized team, and one team that was just like, we're just having fun here, and the fun ended up winning, because that's sometimes you can win games on vibes, and that felt a bit Kirk Cousins. Do you like that scenario was almost being built throughout the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the opposite of the Lions-Bucks games a couple of weeks ago, where the Bucks played pretty much exactly the same game they played this week, but they won that game. They lost this game. We saw the same thing. Baker Mayfield, when the play is broken down, extending drives with his legs. It was a big factor, over 40 yards on the ground. They ran the clock down with both Rashad White and Bucky Irving having about sort of share the carries, but both of them getting a fair few yards and touches the football in the air as well. And unlike the Falcons, the Bucs didn't leave any points on the table, because they blocked a Younghoe Koo field goal. He also missed one from 41 early in the game too, as well. So the Falcons certainly could have had more points to the board, and that did as what led this game to overtime. They should have won this game. They did win this game, but the Bucs show they can compete with anyone. They can beat teams in different ways, and they play really sound football. So just a great game on Thursday night, and I think both teams will certainly be in and around the playoff shouts. We'll see what happens to the Saints as well, but it feels weird saying that the NFC South could have 3 playoff teams.
It is a strange thing, but divisions shift all the time, and at the moment, I think at the moment the actual general standard across, not even necessarily just the NFC, but the NFL as a whole, I think there is a bit more parity this year than there has been for a little while. There's no team that you look at, even the Chiefs, with all of their recent success and the roster, you have question marks over an awful lot of things. And a lot of other teams, there is no that team is just elite and is going to be the hardest to stop. You could ask a bunch of people who's going to win the Super Bowl this year. You'll probably get a bunch of different answers. Teams like the Lions are probably going to be one of the highest mentioned ones who've not won one. It's a more wide open season ever, and I can see the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks of the season being absolutely mental. And Red Zone will be absolute box office on sort of the last 2 weeks of the season, because there will be an awful lot of win and in situations on the board, and we're talking about that in week 5.
Yeah, a big factor of that is the fact that quarterback play is down as a whole this year. Like the likes of Patrick Mahomes have had a great start to the season, but 2 quarterbacks that have had a great start to the season are Aaron Rodgers and Sam Darnold, and they will face off in London this week, and I'm really excited for this game. It was obviously one hell of a game to kick off the London games as a whole, but obviously an unbeaten team in the Vikings playing against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, sold out Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday. It's great. The Jets really need this win if they're going to have serious playoff aspirations, and obviously 4-time MVP quarterback Aaron Rodgers is a big reason as to why they have won the first 2 games, because they've not been that impressive as a whole, as a team. But he is 17-11-1 against the Vikings. He was great against the NFC North when he was in Green Bay, and he's going to town to attempt to end Minnesota's unbeaten start to the season. When it comes to London games, this has to be up there, doesn't it?
I think there's actually a reasonable slate this year, and we've had a few scripts in recent times, but this has narrative. My favourite narrative still is the Sam Darnold revenge game, and it's so often we term revenge games as just it's a player going back to a team they've played at before. This time it's Darnold going back to a team that drafted him, jettisoned him, and cast him off to the trash. And now he's finally found somewhere. Granted, okay, it's through JJ McCarthy's injury, but he's suddenly found something that a lot of other teams missed, and he's now absolutely dealing. And I'll be honest, I am absolutely rooting for him to completely walk over them, because I love that narrative so much. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers will have his own following over here as well. The Jets are no slouches. Their defense is still, reasonably strong. Breece Hall will always be a factor in any game. It's just a case of, can Garrett Wilson actually, turn up and show that they don't need to trade for Devontae Adams, or that he effectively can become that Aaron Rodgers, synth wave wide receiver he always tends to have at each team. He's not yet got that chemistry, and I don't know whether there's enough time left in Aaron Rodgers' career for them to actually gain that. But hopefully a long flight over to London is going to help him, and that sort of time incarceration in the plane is going to be what does them a world of good.
Yeah, and we saw flashes of that in the San Francisco game. We saw flashes of that when they were coming from behind to win against the Titans as well. But we've not seen enough of that connection. So it'll be interesting to see if they can establish that in this game. And you mentioned Darnold. I mean, he's just playing so well right now. He is straight up balling. He's now the third favourite to be MVP, and he now flies to London to face off against his old team, head coach, GM that moved on from him in 2021, as you said. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell was already considered one of the best offensive minds in the league, and game day coaches in the NFL as well, the way he can adjust mid-game. So it's no surprise that he is the favourite for coach of the year. He's done so well with Sam Darnold, who leads the league with 11 touchdown passes. He's schemed up plays for backup playmakers when the likes of Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson have been out over the last couple of games. Now Hawkinson's come back into practice this week, which is excellent for them because they're getting an extra weapon for that offense. He's still Sam Darnold. There are still a few mistakes kicking in there, but his accuracy is a lot better. He's averaging about 10% more completion percentage than he was when he was with the Jets and Carolina. He's making smarter throws a lot of the time as well, holding on to the football longer and getting on to later reads as well, rather than just slinging it. And that has really helped him. And obviously being with Kyle Shanahan last year would have been a big factor in that as well, because there was talk that he may even start with Brock Purdy at the start of last year, because the Niners still weren't sure about him going into camp when they had him, Trey Lance and Sam Darnold. So we've certainly heard a lot of things about him going into this year. He's got his chance. He was going to start anyway, but he's got the chance the whole year now with JJ McCarthy being hurt for the year. And he's playing excellent football. But I think the key to this game for the Minnesota offense is actually going to be Aaron Jones and their run game, because the Jets defense has got some very, very talented DBs. They're one of the best defenses against the pass, so they could frustrate Darnold. So they're going to have to rely on the run game quite a lot, especially early on. And the Jets defense is very vulnerable against the run. They got run all over by Denver. They got run all over by Tennessee, especially San Francisco when Jordan Mason had that monster game. Yeah, and that is something to consider as well before we get into the Minnesota defense, which I really want to talk about in a minute. What do you, as a whole, how do you see this Jets defense, how it plays this season? Because, like I said, they are vulnerable in places.
Yeah, they have, say 3 elite corners, DBs. Just the whole secondary is pretty much strong. You're going to be coming up against Jefferson, Addison, and I'm even going to put Naylor in this because he's been pretty solid this season as well. Sometimes there's nothing you can do to stop Justin Jefferson, even if you have him covered. He still finds a way of getting the ball. So I suspect they'll be putting Sauce Gardner on him quite a bit. But I don't necessarily think that'll stop him. But I agree. I think the key to this game is Aaron Jones, in that, the run D of the Jets is not the strongest. If you can get Javonte Williams to look relevant, then you've got a problem. And a lot of Minnesota's offense has actually gone through Aaron Jones. He's been receiving as well as rushing. He's not really been spelled an awful lot by Ty Chandler, which I'm surprised. I thought Chandler would have much more of a share than he does. But Jones is always there, sort of, all the way across the pitch, really. And he's an almost wide receiver 4 while they have now Hawkinson as well. I'd actually say I think he's 3rd in receptions. I think he's ahead of Naylor, if I remember. But an awful lot does go through him, and he is legit. I honestly did not think when he came across from Green Bay that he had enough left in the tank. And I thought, moving teams now, his age, the miles on the clock, etc. I didn't think it was going to work very well, but I think it's another Kevin O'Connell situation.
Yeah, and it's great to see older running backs succeed in the NFL now as well, with the way it's going more towards a run game league now, which is really awesome to see as well, and that's a big factor. Now, the matchup that I'm really focused on in this game and fascinated by is Aaron Rodgers' Jets offense against Brian Flores' defense for Minnesota, because Flores has found a lot of success by confusing young quarterbacks with different looks and different game plans within the same game. They'll just switch up in the same game. The Vikings and he did the same in Miami as well. But obviously, Aaron Rodgers has seen everything you could possibly can in the NFL. He's experienced. She is the most experienced quarterback in the entire NFL right now. So he's seen everything. So this is one hell of a matchup for me because, in terms of the sheer brain power between both men, the battle just fascinates me because Rodgers is one of the best at IDing a defense and checking out or something, and Flores is the best at giving you exotic looks and you don't know what's coming. You could literally have anyone rush from anywhere. You have about 10 men on the line of scrimmage, and 4 of them will drop back. Like it's just the way it is. So that is going to be one hell of a matchup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like with what I was saying with Minnesota, in that you the QB is almost a bit more of a unknown with Darnold, even though we've got 4 weeks of pretty strong evidence that he's good, but he has some legit receivers. When you go to the Jets side, you've got Garrett Wilson, who should be an alpha and has been struggling with that. Mike Williams, who's just coming back from fitness. Alan Lazard, who is probably going to be the other key to this game because he's still, at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers' best mate. And I think that familiarity is what he wants to keep trusting. So the Vikings are probably going to have to be very careful of, what Lazard does, not getting too distracted by, Wilson and Williams running around. But even Tyler Conklin's going to be potentially a factor here as well because, coming off the line and being that 4th option, which is pretty key, is going to be, critical to, how many different looks Rodgers is going to have. And I agree that, the Flores defense scenario, Rodgers is going to have seen everything and have probably seen more. I mean, with his conspiracy theories, he's seen an awful lot in his time, I'll tell you. But it's whether Rodgers has the trust in his wide receiver core to get out on the field what he's got in his brain. It's maybe the best way of putting it. He knows he can read it, but he's got to get the wide receivers to read it, react, and be able to pin the ball to them because he can have the absolute perfect read on what that defense is going to do. But if the receiver does not run to the right place or get the break or get the separation, it's a wasted effort. And I think that's what's frustrated him in the first few weeks is very much that from a lot of ones. That's why Lazard has had so much work. Because he's the one guy who, I've seen it from you before. I know you can do it. And as Mike Williams gets back to fitness, I suspect he'll gain an extra step and he will be able to do that. And as the rapport with Wilson grows, that'll happen. Whether it's going to happen this week, I don't know, because that Vikings defense does still have a lot of strength to it. But I actually think it bodes well for it being reasonably high scoring as a match, which the fans in London, that's what they're going to want. They don't want a 9-6 kick fest like we've had before. So the signs are there that this could be a reasonably decent scoring game because each side has strengths and weaknesses that marry nicely.
Yeah, for the Jets, this is a huge game because they can't really afford to go 2-3 because they've got a brutal schedule coming up. And they could quite easily find themselves on the outside looking in the playoffs because they got this game. They played Buffalo at home, and then they've got Pittsburgh away. They've got a division game against the Patriots, and then they have Houston. They have Arizona, which will be a difficult game as well in Arizona. They have to win 3 or 4 of those games if they want to challenge the Bills for the division the way it's gonna look. So very important 6-game stretch for Robert Saleh. Who the pressure has been put on after the loss last week. They just, whenever they go against a team that's well coached, disciplined, they have been manhandled in those games. That's just the way the Jets have been under Salah. That he's 4-14 in division. That's a terrible record in division. They had 13 penalties for 90 yards last week. It ended so many drives, and that's probably the reason why they lost to the Broncos, to be honest with you, because they had so many false starts and things like that, illegal shifts. And that can't happen against a team as the Vikings, as well coached as the Vikings. So now it's prediction time. That's why I'm going to go with the line, which is 2.5 points. Vikings are favoured by. That's a normal home. That's a normal home sort of favourite line you'd get. And obviously it's not a normal game. It's in London. You're going to see some weird stuff. Obviously it's not a normal home game for the Vikings, but I'm going to pick the Vikings just because I feel like they are a well coached team, and that's what the Jets struggle against. So yeah, give me the Vikings to cover the spread in this one.
I am in the exact same boat, purely because I have more faith in each of the components of the Vikings. I feel like there's less unknowns and less question marks. It's like the Jets have the upside that they can do that, and it could be a close game, but I still think Vikings to cover the spread pretty much.
Awesome. Right, we'll stick with the theme of NFL in the UK because we were invited down to an event put on by Global Ticket Marketplace via GoGo last week, where I was lucky enough to sit down with Christian Wade, former Bills running back, and we spoke about lots of things. We spoke about rugby. We spoke about his return to rugby. We spoke about the NFL, and a lot of chat on the Bills. A lot of chats on the Bills, because they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now. Especially when I spoke to him before the Ravens lost. So Christian plays for Gloucester Rugby. Now he actually replaced Lewis Rees-Zammit, who went to the NFL, obviously now in the Jags practice squad at Gloucester, and we spoke ahead of Gloucester's game against their intense local rivals, the Bristol Bears, at Ashton Gate. In that game, he went and scored a hat-trick. He would play of the match performance, scoring 3 tries, and now back in English rugby after trying to make it in the NFL. I asked him how it does feel to return to the league he is considered a legend in.
Oh man, it's incredible, man. I missed that Premiership action. It's been 6 years, and the last time I played in the Premiership was almost like 6 years to the date, and I was playing against Gloucester as well. So it's quite ironic that I've signed with them now. But like I said, really looking forward to it. Unfortunately came up short on the weekend, but I'm sure we'll put that right this weekend and begin to push on as the games come.
Christian was brought into Gloucester Rugby to replace Lewis Rees-Zammit, who departed the clubs to follow in the Woodwade's footsteps and try his hand in the NFL. The Welshman signed to the preseason roster of the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, hoping to make it onto their final 53. Unfortunately, like many other players in the NFL, he was a victim on the NFL's cut-down day and didn't make it to the 53-man roster, but he was given a second chance on the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad. Wade, who spent 3 years on the practice squad of the Bills, of course, knows exactly what Rees-Zammit is experiencing, and I asked him how he can go from here.
For him, it's just all about, understanding the game as much as possible in terms of a gameplay aspect. Learning the plays or the playbook, so to speak, is just like learning another language. Once you understand the language and the jargon that's being used, then, you'll be able to, get set, be in the right positions. But then once that ball gets snapped, and even just before the ball gets snapped, it's all the pre-snap reads that you have to do and understanding where everybody is and where people are going to be coming from in terms of the defense that they're running. And then obviously when you do get your hands on the ball, how you're going to, read your blocks, how you're going to get that first down or that touchdown. So for me, it's just really about that, trying to get himself as prepared mentally and physically as possible, so that when the opportunities come, he can, really give it 100%.
As I mentioned, we were invited down to the event by Viagogo, the official ticket partner of the NFL, and they invited Wade down to talk to us, the media, about the growth of the sport in the UK ahead of this first London game. Wade's former team Buffalo, of course, played in London in the International Series last year, and that was the first set of games in London where UK fans had bought more tickets than travelling fans, which I thought was a very interesting stat indeed. A big part of that was the country's eagerness to see the Bills, who have star quarterback Josh Allen, of course, have been to playoffs every single year since 2019. Wade obviously happened to join the Bills that season as well, and he got to witness the start of a dominant period in the division and in the AFC. I asked him if he felt there was something special brewing in the building when he joined in 2019.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Coach McDermott should talk about it all the time. We've got something special going on here. No one's expecting us to do anything. He's been very intentional about the guys he brings in and the guys that he didn't want in the building. And that's from coaches to staff to, just literally everybody there. And we really became like a tight-knit family, understanding, what we were trying to achieve as a whole organisation. The owners were very accommodating in terms of anything we need. They said they would do it. Even when we got hit with COVID, we still was able to band together and find a way to get through, those challenges. And I think that was the first year we got to the playoffs. So year on year we was going one better, and Coach McDermott and his staff have been able to really build something special over there. And it was such an exciting time, such a great experience for me. The relationships that I have made, the friendships, long-term relationships. It's incredible. I still have those friendships today, some with coaches and players and staff as well. So it's awesome.
Now, of course, Sean McDermott's Bills have got off to a hot start this season, sitting 3-1 on the year and looking very much like contenders for the AFC and the Super Bowl. That is a big achievement because they've lost so many of their key cornerstones that were there in the building with Wade in 2019. Obviously, star receiver Stephon Diggs, as well as all-pro defensive backs Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. They all left this off-season as the Bills looked to rebuild. But they are looking just as good and are getting so much out of young players while still keeping the same culture, which Wade speaks really, really highly of.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the organisation. If you've done it right and been intentional about who you have in the building, you're going to be able to continue to build and not take backward steps. So I think, like you said, you got new guys like Mac Hollins. I'm trying to remember all the players now. There's loads. Even like James Cook, he's in there. Let him cook. And then you got Ed Oliver, he's now starting to come into his own. Obviously, you got Von Miller, guys like that. So, they've made some great additions. And the culture that they've created or that we've created over that time has obviously continued to evolve, and that's a beautiful thing to see.
A big part of their early success has been Josh Allen, who is one of the bookies' favourites to win MVP through 4 weeks. And that would be his first MVP, of course. He's widely regarded as a top 3 quarterback in the league. And I asked Wade what made him so special.
Like I said to someone earlier, he's just such a down-to-earth guy, like a normal dude. But then when he goes on the field, he's a different beast, man. He's just like Superman, you know what I mean? He doesn't look like he can step. He doesn't look like he's going to be fast. He doesn't look like he's that strong. He doesn't look like he can hurdle players. He does, you know what I'm saying? It's just, he'll do stuff you're like, what? Where did that, you know what I mean? Where did that come from? So yeah, he's just a talent you can't ignore. I think he's definitely grown as a quarterback year on year. And you see that in his performances. I mean, from very early on, you saw the athletic ability, but now he's adding the football IQ to it, which is making the difference. You know what I mean?
Now, of course, Allen and the Bills have been deep into playoffs several times under McDermott, but they've never made it to the big game, the Super Bowl, and there's a big reason for that, and that reason is obviously the Chiefs' dominance. The Chiefs are going for their first ever three-peat this season, but I'd say the Bills look stronger this year, if I'm being honest. And being a franchise that went to and lost 4 straight Super Bowls in the 90s, there's a lot of hope for Buffalo fans. That just when will it be our time? I asked Wade if they could finally get over that hump and win the city of Buffalo's first Super Bowl ring.
It's tough to tell, man, because I just the years that we were there, I was there. It was always like that final hurdle. I just don't know what it was or what happened. We just always seemed to You know what I mean? And it was very frustrating. I know it was frustrating for a lot of the guys that was there. But yeah, whatever that is, like, if they can get over that, there's nothing that can stop. There's nothing that can stop them, man. They've got, you know, we've always had a great defense and a great offense. You know what I mean? And special teams as well has probably been one of our strongest areas. So, you know, if all three phases can connect up throughout the whole game, then there's no reason why they can't win a Super Bowl, man.
I really enjoyed that interview. I hope you guys did too. As always, I'm massively grateful for the opportunity. A big thank you to Viagogo for inviting us to their Tickets to Tailgate event, and to Christian Wade for giving us his time too. Really enjoyed it, and hopefully there'll be more interviews with people like that throughout the season. Yeah, interesting insight, and I find it really fascinating how that culture was developed by Sean McDermott, because he has certainly got one hell of a young team playing well. And we'll carry on talking about the Bills now, because we're going to look at the state of play in the AFC. We're going to do the same for the NFC next week as well, but we're going to turn to the AFC this week. We're going to look at every team, just spend a few minutes talking about each team's season so far, where they've looked good, where they've looked bad, and how we think they're going to fare the rest of the season. And we'll start with the Bills, because we've got some interesting insight there from how they built this roster. I think Baltimore really needed that win last week, so I'm not going to overreact to that game. If I'm being honest, it's rare that a team that only going to get only going to get healthier this season. But with enough injuries the Bills have had, that really does feel like they're going to get healthier rather than more banged up. Their offense actually was more balanced than before, which is brilliant. And as I mentioned, Alan is one of the favourites for MVP. I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably say that they're one of the teams I'd least like to face in the AFC. So yeah, I'm certainly really impressed by the Bills so far.
Yeah, they've been. I almost want to say as advertised. There was plenty of question marks going into the season with the turnover, but it's been, a reasonably smooth start. As you say, you can kind of accept the Baltimore game as such. It feels weird looking at them without what I would consider as like an alpha receiver, like your Stephon Diggs of previous seasons. And Khalil Shakir has stepped up pretty well. I'm surprised Keon Coleman hasn't been involved more, but he will develop, I'm sure, over the course of time. But you're saying having that balance has been pretty key. James Cook has been critical to that success as well. They've done all this when people are expecting their main weapons to be Cook and Dalton Kincaid, and Kincaid's kind of been quiet so far this season. So you get the feeling that the Bills' offense actually might have another gear to be able to click into, but they've been able to just get the job done efficiently. And then the defense, despite all the turnover, they've got this group working well, and they almost look unchallenged in that division this season.
Yeah, absolutely. You probably said their biggest challenge is the Jets. We will sort of gloss over them because we covered them quite a lot in detail earlier. How would you assess their season so far before anything you've not said already before we move over to the Patriots?
As in the Jets season, as a quick note, it's been a tale of inconsistency and a tale of a team that's still working to get its chemistry, and it's a ticking time bomb with Aaron Rodgers as to how long he's got left. And, if he's got 2 seasons left in him, then you've got to hope that next season is the one, because this one's not looking like it.
Yeah. I think they will turn it around, but I just don't. I think they'll get to the playoffs, but I don't trust them in the playoffs, and I think that's sort of where I feel with the Jets. We'll go over to the Patriots now. The Bills are 3-1. The Jets are 2-2. The Patriots are 1-3, but third in the division so far this season. I've been quite impressed with the job that Gerard Mayo has done really with his team. I was quite vocal pre-season about them having probably the worst roster in the league, but this team is really well coached, and they will win games because they are really well coached. Their offense doesn't really excite me much, but their defense does. There's a lot of players on the defense that I like watching. I mean, Keon White, for example, he's having a great season. He's one of PFF's highest grade edge rushers in the whole league this season. So they found a great player there, and the secondary as well is always great. But it's nice to see Christian Gonzalez back healthy. I don't know about you, but I feel better about the Patriots now than I did before the season started.
Definitely. Coaching is critical, and it's funny how the Patriots effectively are going through a little bit of a rebuild, but have not really lost their identity even without Bill Belichick. It's a case of they're still a very good defense. They're still really well coached. Yes, they still have slight problems with fumbling the ball at the moment. Certainly Ramondre Stevenson, but in some respects, it would almost be a bad thing if they were too good at this moment, like people getting false optimism that the roster has still got some holes to go, but they've got the pieces, especially on the defense, to this rebuild is not going to take long. It's more of a retool, and I think after that first game against the Bengals, I think people kind of realized that maybe they're not as woeful as we think, and we're still yet to see Drake May, of course, so we don't know how that draft pick is going to pan out, but obviously there's a lot of capital built into him. At the moment, I think the main thing they need to focus on is, the likes of Jalen Polk and Demario Douglas. It's a case of, are they going to be their wide receivers of the future, and, getting them built up with their NFL experience.
Yeah, Polk has certainly made some plays coming out of Washington. It's always the exact opposite for the Dolphins. We feel terrible about the Dolphins now, and I don't even know where to start with Miami. Obviously, Tua's concussion in week 2 against the Bills is a big factor as to why they are 1-3. Going on IR for 4 weeks is obviously made things a lot worse. But this Dolphins offense, even when Tua was there, wasn't functioning to the way it has before. And without him, it's one of the worst I've ever seen. The first team since 2016 Browns that went 0-16 to never lead a game through 4 games because they had a last-second kick against the Jags, never actually held a lead in that game. And I think a big factor is the offensive line. Chris Greer, the GM, he failed to address the offensive line properly before the season. They lost Robert Hunt, probably their second best offensive lineman behind Teron Armstead in free agency this year. They drafted Patrick Paul as a developmental tackle behind Teron Armstead. Now he's playing because Armstead's been hurt so far, and he's not looked great. And then Chris Greer, the GM, had the audacity to say that he said the media were more worried about the offensive line than they are, and they've trotted out a terrible offensive line so far this season. And yeah, I think that just shows it's just mismanagement of this roster. And then knowing obviously to his injury history, his concussion history, he got through a whole season last year. But they kept Skylar Thompson as backup, and Skylar Thompson got hurt behind the offensive line straight away. And then you had Tim Boyle, and now you're on your 4th quarterback already this season in Snoop Huntley, Tyler Huntley, who I don't have a problem with him on Monday night. It's just you can tell that he has been in the offense about a week and a half, and it was a very complex offense. So it's just not gone well for the Dolphins in that aspect. It's just very, very poorly run. And then, as I was alluding to earlier, the teams adjusted to what Mike McDaniel was trying to do midway through last season, and then the offense just didn't have the same effect last year. Now, admittedly, Tyreek Hill got hurt at the end of last year and everything, but they still adjusted to McDaniel's game plans, and he's not quite recovered from that yet. And it has been an issue in close games, and now about 2 as well, it's certainly an issue. He's not come up with anything new to combat what defenses know he's going to do. Sometimes I watch the Dolphins and I find myself knowing exactly what's going to happen because I've seen that play or that look or that motion before, and that is an issue because if I'm noticing it, then NFL defenses are definitely noticing it. That is. So I think he said things need to change. Everything needs to change with the offense, and we'll see what happens throughout the season. We'll see what happens with when Tua comes back in 2 weeks' time, because I think he's expected to come straight back off IR with the way that he's sounding. He's responding well. He's been in the building loads. It'll come back off IR straight away by the sounds of things. They're not getting any production out of Tyreek or Waddle because they're both being covered. They know how to be dealt with now, and then when they do get targeted, they drop the ball a lot, which is a problem. And they're not targeting their big free agent acquisition, Johnny Smith, either. So it just this offense just absolutely stinks. The defense is playing well. considering injuries, to be honest with you, but they will miss Jalen Phillips now, who's out for the year after having a knee injury, a partial ACL tear a year after tearing his ACL. Sorry, no, he did his Achilles a year before. An ACL injury, often an Achilles injury, is not great for him, but when he's on the field, he's certainly impactful. And then he joins the list now of $430 million of players that missed a Monday night game. So you add Phillips to that, and that is a big issue as to why the Dolphins have obviously failed last year. But for me, the main thing is they mismanaged this offseason a lot, and even with the injuries, you're seeing why they had to adjust the offensive line and why they had to get an extra receiving weapon. Odell Beckham's coming back this week, so we'll see what happens there. But even when Tua's back, this team doesn't fill me with much confidence at all, if I'm being honest.
Offensive line is so key, and as you say, they just did not deal with it. And you wonder why Tua gets all these concussions. Well, there's your reason. You've got to keep him on his feet first. And it's so strange because say putting my fantasy head on for a second, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, to a lesser extent Mostert and Tua as well, all pretty high fantasy draft picks, all with massive capital in them. Tyreek Hill was a top 3 pick in quite a few redraft leagues, and as soon as Tua went down, and I mean, to be fair, the signs were even there in the Jags game as well, that all is not well. And as you quite expertly pointed out, they've been found out, and the NFL moves quickly. And if you don't move and adapt with it, you get left behind. And the Dolphins are in severe risk of being completely left behind. I think it's almost the point where this season you already chalk it up as a bit of a loss, kind of a bit of a development season. But what they need to develop is a plan B and a plan C, because plan A wasn't working before Tua got injured. And then when he did, they had no way of changing how they play their system to adapt to a quarterback that is not Tua. And, they obviously went out to try and find a guy who was close enough to Tua, but you should really have had them in your organization to start with and taking all the practice reps. And, the fact that Skylar got injured so quickly afterwards kind of gives you an idea that it probably doesn't matter who's back there. They're going to end up pancaked at some point anyway. So, I think it's a bit of an offensive line rebuild required. And as we know, they are some of the most expensive and most difficult to find commodities in the NFL and in the draft. So it's almost in their interest to try and get a high pick to get one of those.
Absolutely. We'll go on to the AFC North now. The Steelers lead the AFC North, which I'm sure you're very happy about, James, to be honest with you. But being honest, did you really think you'd be sitting at 3-1?
No, I mean, to be fair, the Jesse James jersey is quite a heck of a throwback, but I didn't want to use Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell on the backboard, so here we are. At least I've got name value. I just have to like the number 81. I did not expect 3-1 at all. I mean, to be fair, when you look at the schedule, you can kind of see the pathway to a 3-1. It gives me throwbacks to the season where we went unbeaten for such a long period at the beginning of the season, and then just fell to pieces when it actually mattered, building up to the playoffs, and then got knocked out in the first wildcard round. So it's one of those where we've been here before, and it's not ended particularly well. That being said, Justin Fields has been really good, and I don't want to use a better superlative than that, purely because I'm sure there would be better, but he has been competent. He has been able to do things on the ground and in the air, and he's given us probably the best quarterback play we've had since Roethlisberger was good. So even the latter years of him, I think Fields is an improvement. We have not had to rush Russell Wilson back, and even when he's fit, I don't think he's getting in the lineup anymore. But Fields has needed to be good because the rushing game has been pretty rough. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren's been injured quite frequently, and Najee Harris is flattered to deceive. I suspect his days in Pittsburgh are numbered as well. So we've had to rely on Fields using his feet, and the passing game has been still quiet, but George Pickens is still solid. Pat Freiermuth is to be one of the more used tight ends in the league in terms of receptions. And at the end of the day, it's defense. Any team with TJ Watt who's going to have a decent chance, because he is an absolute wrecking ball, and I love the guy to bits. And if there is going to be a team that goes with the defense wins championships adage, it's the Steelers this season. So I'm not predicting that. I am absolutely not predicting that we go all the way. But, we could be one or two trades or one or two picks away from something that no one called. And there's always one team that comes from left field to get you, that gets to the playoffs and has a bit of a run. I still predict we'll get into and lose in the first wildcard round. But if you'd asked at the start of the season, will the Steelers get into the playoffs? I don't think you'd have had many people saying yes.
In our predictions we did before the season, I had them going 7-10 because the second half of the year is just brutal, and you needed to win these games now. We'll see what happens the second half of the year. But from what I've seen from that defense, obviously it's great. It's always been great. No, I was expecting. The offense has intrigued me all year because, as you mentioned, Fields has been great. I think Arthur Smith deserves a lot of credit as well because in Atlanta he didn't get the best out of his players at all, but he is getting the best out of Justin Fields. It's the opposite here. And fair play to Fields as well.
This year,
I was going to say,
getting credit.
I know. And fair play to Fields as well because he's being smart with the football. He's getting out half a second quicker than last year, and he's only had the one turnover worthy play as well. So he's certainly been smart with the football, and he's again, they're just playing to his strengths. I think the receivers are looking better than I thought they would as well. Getting a lot out of Calvin Austin, which is a good sign. But then, if you can add another guy like a Devontae Adams or someone like that, then this offense does excite me, which I didn't expect to say at the start of the season. Going to Ravens now, second in the division at 2-2. A weird one because I didn't feel great about them at all going into the Buffalo game. Covered off that Raiders loss especially. Defense been passed all over, and Josh Allen was coming to town, who again was the MVP favourite going into that game. Yeah. But that unit stepped up. They limited the Bills, stopped the run, especially they're very good against the run. And when they couldn't get James Cook going, that is part of the reason why the Bills lost that game. Yeah. And then we also got to see the first glimpse at how they'd look in the big games come December and January with Derrick Henry's first big day, because he's going to have that's what the Ravens going to look like later in the season should they get to the playoffs, and that's what they needed last year against Kansas City in the championship game. If they can run the football like that late in the season, I'm going to struggle to pick against them in the playoffs because they're going to be hard to stop. O-line has been better the last couple of weeks compared to the first couple of weeks, and they're still generating the pass rush despite losing guys. There were 32 quarterback hits this year, and Kyle Van Noy had 6 sacks this month. AFC player, defensive player of the month as well, which is for a guy like Kyle Van Noy, I don't think we expected that. But fair play to the Ravens. Feel weird about them 2-2, but that Baltimore game pretty much is how we expected them to look with Derrick Henry, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been a slight change of identity with having Derrick Henry on board, but we're now seeing that identity come to fruition. It's one of those where you look at that team and you go, if they lost either Lamar or Henry to injury, that would pretty much be season over. But so long as you keep them 2 fit, they could almost afford to lose at anybody else in reality. Obviously, the passing game's taken a bit of a knock, and the talk of fancy, the curious case of Mark Andrews, and where is he? Barely getting usage at the moment, but in some ways they've not needed it. If anything, what they've needed is Mark Andrews to block so Henry can run. And that's their new identity. Week 1, we all thought, is it the passing of the touch to Isaiah Likely? He's now done nothing. You've got multiple tight ends, but they're just doing their offensive line duties essentially, because Derrick Henry is running all over teams now. And say the Bills was handy because they were forced to have to use their receivers, which isn't necessarily, their actual receiving core is not as strong. And I think the Ravens managed to exploit that really well, especially when Shakir was struggling. So they know that they're developing quite nicely in that regard, as well as the pass rush. The rush. So I think all the signs are there that they will be at the business end at the end of the season, and very much as it has been for the last few years. You can chalk up those early losses just to, chemistry, getting Henry up and running, and figuring out this identity. But it's not taken them very long. So I've got an annoying, nagging feeling that the Steelers will not be on their perch for very long. And I see the Ravens comfortably winning this division personally.
Yeah, I think it will be between those two. And that comes from someone who had the Bengals winning the division and the 1 seed before the season. I got that completely wrong. 1-3 after getting their first. Yeah, 1-3 after getting their first win last week. But obviously, a lot needs to change for this team to be a contender in the AFC right now, which is a shame because, as mentioned, I had them getting the 1 seed because they had a really, really easy schedule this year. And they've dropped a couple of games they really should have won in that easy schedule, which is now it's not looking like it at all. Again, I feel like a broken record with the Bengals, saying offensive line isn't very good. Receivers are still getting to grips with the things at the start of the season because they've had a topsy-turvy camp. How many years have we had that? But obviously the thing with this year is the defense is not the same. It's been bad this year. It really has. They usually have a good pass rush with Trey Hendrickson and co. 29th in the league in pressures this year. That's terrible. They're also getting run all over as well, which in this division, which is very run first compared to a lot of other divisions, that's a very, very bad sign.
Yeah, that defense is pretty much, you want to be playing against it. It is a bit of a sieve at the moment. And their offense has just not been clicking. Jamar Chase with the holdout, T. Higgins with the injury. You've been having weeks where it's Andre Yoshivas and Trenton Irwin as your 1 and 2 punch. So that's going to be interesting, basically. Yes, you have Joe Burrow, but what did it cost you? And to be fair, I'm amazed that Joe Burrow hasn't got injured yet, given the O-line, as you say. So there's a lot that needs to happen for the Bengals to get back to relevancy in this division. And I think there's too many problems on the defense and they're not really in the mode at the moment where they can outscore teams in massive shootouts. And I don't even think they're going to click into that gear either. There's just too many problems on both lines. So it's going to be a long, painful season. And I know a fair few Bengals fans where it's already looking a bit bleak. So I'm afraid I can't really offer too many more shoots of recovery.
I think the 3 sort of hardest teams to supporting the AFC this year are the Bengals, the Dolphins, and probably the Jags as well. And all 3 of them would have had playoff aspirations, and their seasons have all gone like. I think the Bengals are probably the team that has the most hope out of all 3 of those teams, but it's not looking good on defense. Right, we'll finish the AFC North with the Browns. I think they're probably one of the hardest teams to watch in football at the moment, if I'm being honest. Yeah. The offensive line is atrocious. Deshaun Watson has already taken 19 sacks, and the offensive line has allowed 79 pressures this season, 9 more than any other team. It has been horrifically bad. Now, fair play to Deshaun Watson. He was actually quite good last week. He was PFF's number 2 quarterback last week. He made some really nice throws, 3 big time throws. But when it mattered, he took the 4th down sack when driving to win the game, and obviously the Raiders ended up winning that game. But there's something to be encouraged by, certainly with the way Deshaun looked last week, but especially behind that offensive line. The defense has been good, but not as good as last year, and it's really hard to replicate last year's form. You're not going to see that again and again and again, but it's still been really good. A very injured team, obviously severely impacted by the loss of Bill Callahan, the best offensive line coach in the league. He was already papering over cracks last year. Now, without Callahan, they're really struggling. Obviously, again, as I mentioned, they'll be encouraged by the way Deshaun looked last week. But if that's all there is to be excited about, it's not looking good for the Browns.
Yeah, he was certainly spent a few of the first few weeks on the floor. Well, and probably needing a massage or 2 after that, to be fair, knowing him. But that offensive line, them as a serious contender for the division, really. There's just too many problems, and it's almost shown by the run game. They're going to get Nick Chubb back, but you almost wonder if he wants to come back, given what he's going to have to try and run through. Ford has done very little. Deonta Foreman had a flash for a brief moment. Everyone gave him a little bit of hype, and he then disappeared off the face of the earth. So probably into the back of another lineman. So yeah, With the Browns, obviously in long plays to Amari Cooper. At the beginning of the season, he was just dropping stuff like no man's business and looked very distracted and completely disjointed. And then this last week, I believe he caught a really long ball, and it got brought back for a phantom holding call that really should not have been given.
A really good throw from Deshaun.
Yeah,
that was a really good throw from Deshaun. It was probably the best throw I've seen him make since Houston days as well. So, yeah,
that changes the whole complexion of both this conversation and, I wouldn't even necessarily say their season, because I think there is still too much wrong with that team. But I think a lot of, the media outlets, us here today, etc., would have a very different conversation if we're sat here 2-2 and Amari Cooper's had a decent game, Watson's made that one and got them the win, doesn't get a chance to make the boneheaded play at the end and gets the W. And yes, there's too much wrong, but it's not insurmountable. I would actually say that they've probably got a better chance of getting out of this rut than the Bengals do. Just purely because that defense has got the strength that they can hold them through. The Steelers have proven that as long as you have a decent defense, your offense doesn't actually have to do much. Just keep the quarterback on their feet. And the Browns, with a development, could get to that point, but it's still too much money sunk into Watson to be able to fix it properly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Right, we'll go on to the AFC South now. Start with Houston, sitting at 3-1, heading into their big game against Buffalo this week. They've been okay, I'd say. Not the Super Bowl contenders we expected out of the block, but they're still going to probably walk this division, I'd say, with the way it's going. Stroud's been good. Hard to top last year. Not quite at the level, but behind this offensive line, he's doing a very, very good job. And the one loss they have, Minnesota absolutely exploited that offensive line, and that's why they lost that game. But other than that, Texans have been great. The defense has been really good. They're getting some really good things out of young players like Derek Stingley, of course, and Kamari Lassiter at corner this year. He's one of the favourites for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And then of the three receivers, that the main ones that maybe even four that you'd say are going to be big weapons in that team. If you pick Nico Collins in fantasy, you're loving life because he leads the league in receiving yards. Fun team, the Texans. Not quite what we thought they would be. We thought they'd be look really, really good, but they're going to walk this division, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to walk it because they have to play the Colts, the Titans, and the Jaguars twice, and that feels like it should be 6 wins. But you know how unpredictable the NFL can be, especially in division. They are still a strong team, and yes, if you picked Tank Dell in fantasy, you are otherwise crying, which is part of the reason why my season has gone so badly, because I thought that chemistry was to be had permanently, but injuries and Stephon Diggs have kind of put pay to that. However, it is an offense that has multiple different ways of doing it. Losing Joe Mixon has hurt them a lot in the last few weeks. He was looking good as well. I still don't believe he's going to be back this week. By the looks of things, I think he's missed 2 practices again. So I suspect it'll be another week. But when they get him back and they have the run and pass options both available again fully, I suspect that they will click back into their gear. I think they're still, getting covered a bit too much at the moment. But it's what you've got to do with the Texans, to be fair. But they will be there come the end of the season, and it's just a case of will they hit red-hot form just in time for the playoffs and get it at the right moment. It could be very much a case of, yes, it's a bit of a slow start, but they're 3-1, but the momentum carries them at the end into something a bit more special come, January.
Yeah, I think just get a home playoff game. You're going to have a home playoff game, and I think they'll certainly be contenders in the playoffs. We'll see how good they are. I sort of agree with the same lines as you. The Colts, probably one of my biggest disappointments, I say, this year because of the way they've looked, but yet they're still 2-2. Now teams have got tape on Anthony Richardson. He struggled this year. The defense has been the worst in the NFL so far. And that shocks me because with that talent on the defense, you think it would be a top half unit at least.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a shock, and I still look at the names there, and I kind of almost refuse to believe it. But the stats don't lie. You kind of hope that schedule adjustment and over time things pan out a bit more towards the mean. But you never know with this league sometimes. But Anthony Richardson has been found out. I would say found out quite majorly, but a lot of the time he's kind of doing it to himself. There's a lot of throws that are just inaccurate, a lot of interceptions, a lot of finding himself on the floor.
He's trying to push the ball downfield
risk.
too far as well. He's got the highest average depth of target in the entire league, and yet they're getting nothing out of it. So I think I think Steichen's not having a great call. Whether it's Richardson or Steichen or whatever, it's not how it looked at the start of last year. Maybe they were too confident in the way he looked or something, but I certainly think you need to sort of put the training wheels back on at least, I'd say.
And I think losing Jonathan Taylor potentially for a few weeks now as well is going to cripple them, because he was pretty much putting the team on his back for a little bit, especially with Richardson's struggles. He was, he could batter through the Steelers defense and was doing a solid job. And losing him for definitely this week, potentially 2 or 3 weeks. They've not put him on IR, so it shouldn't be as many as 4, but they are going to be rough times. Although there was, certainly in the fantasy community, there was a lot of talk of, could you possibly bench Anthony Richardson for a little bit? Let Joe Flacco just pass it for a bit, given, we're going to struggle with the run game. Let's get an accurate passer in. Yes, he's not mobile. Yes, he doesn't offer the same versatility that Richardson does, but he will make Pittman, Downs, Pierce, maybe even Adonai Mitchell all relevant and all, useful, and give them an alternative identity that teams aren't going to necessarily have schemed for. Granted, it's still obviously Joe Flacco, so you have, that question mark, but he's come in relief before and brought teams to the brink of success. So it would almost be in their interest, if they want to be good, that's what they do. But I think they want to stick by Richardson no matter what, even if he has to play hurt, having had no practice, which feels suicidal, because I almost get the impression that, given it a few years, we might be talking about Anthony Richardson the same way we talk about Tua. That he's an injury-prone liability that isn't elite, that has multiple facets to his game, but if he's missing, the offense doesn't work. But even when he is there, there are still question marks to be had all the time. And the injury history will speak for itself over the course of time. But right now, he's one of those players that I just haven't got the confidence in.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shame, because I really like the look of him before he got hurt and before he had the concussion last year as well. So we'll see how he fares. But we'll go from the worst defense in the NFL to the best, because the Titans are a weird one. Had it not been for Will Levis's costly turnovers, they probably would be 3-1 right now. They probably should. Yeah, I said they should be 3-1 right now. They're a good team, especially on defense. As I said, number 1 in the league, number 1 against the pass. Not bad against the run, and they've been missing Jeffrey Simmons as well. It's a good time for them to be on a bye this week, because they can stop shooting themselves in the foot. They're playing well. They've got enough time to turn this around, you could say. It's just the turnovers have been so costly, haven't they?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where I don't actually think necessarily Levis has been horrific to the point of you would need to come up with another option. He's actually had his moments where you're like, if you don't have Levis in the team, that ain't happening, kind of thing. But so when you look at the receivers' productivity, you're not quite sure each week whether it's Ridley, Hopkins, nobody, because that's always an option with that team. And a lot of it seems to have been Tony Pollard, and then he went off the boil a little bit as well. So it's if they can get their offense clicking, if they can start getting the variety of play in there, get Levis to, screw his head on a little harder and think a little bit more, which is just, it comes with development. At the end of the day, he still only had, 1 season worth of experience, and it wasn't even a full one. So he's still developing, but there's enough shoots there that he can be competent. I'm not going to say he's going to be elite at all, but it might be what they need. But much like the conversation with the Steelers, if you've got a solid defense that's working, there is every chance you can turn that round, but just got to stop making the mistakes. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And we'll see what happens with them. And we'll finish the AFC South with the Jags, who are like an asteroid falling from the sky and a minute after a shocker before start. The way it's going, someone's getting fired, maybe everyone. The way it's going, sort of continuing on from their collapse last year. Obviously, they were real good contenders for the 1 seed at one point last year at 8-3, 8-2, throughout the playoffs, and now they're winless this year. I mean, I'd clean house if I'm being honest. Trent Baalke's failure to address the offensive line this season has cost the team. It's the past 2 years really, and in the draft, it's not who you pick, it's who you pass on. And Trayvon Walker's been okay. He's starting edge on some teams in the NFL, and he can cause chaos as a why he got 10 sacks last year. But Aiden Hutchinson was right there, and that's unforgivable in my opinion, because Walker's been good, but he's not been great like Hutchinson has been, who conveniently leads the league in sacks right now.
Yeah.
So much money, so much talent on that defense. It was great last year, but this year so far it's been terrible. And that's after adding Eric Armstead as well. And again, Trevor Lawrence has been okay, not bad, not amazing. But with that offensive line, he's not the issue. I can tell you that now. Because they can't run the football. I think the receivers are great. I think Brian Thomas is a great spark for them. But the only way right now that Doug Peterson keeps his job is if either he fires Press Taylor mid-season, or he strips him from play calling. Otherwise, he's gone. I think that's the only way he keeps his job. Is that if he does it, if he takes over play calling and does it himself. I think that's it. Otherwise, he's gone. And there could be someone gone before they even travel to London. The way it's going, because if you're 0-5, you lose 2 division games, your season's over.
I think they're a loss away from clearing house. I genuinely think the plane ticket to London might not be bought yet, is maybe the way to put it. Certainly for a few of them. So whether they'll go gentle and say, well, we'll take a few coaches out first and then go for Pearson, but I don't think it's going to be very long, to be honest. You say O-line's been shocking. Defense has failed to live up to expectations, even though they weren't exactly high either, which is really concerning. You've had, so many missed opportunities to make this team great. I think there was the honeymoon period at the beginning where everyone thought Doug Peterson was the answer for this franchise, and the end of last season proved he wasn't. And they need fresh ideas. They actually do need a fresh coach and fresh house, and just a complete mental reset. Accept that this year might be a bit of a loss. Get something better going on the O-line. Get a whole new regime in. You've already paid Lawrence, so you've got to make sure he's the guy. So give him the protection you need. He has the weapons, in reality. I think Brian Thomas will prove to be brilliant. Evan Ingram, when he's fit, is going to be decent for at least a few more years. Christian Kirk as a 2, when he's given targets that are actually decent, will actually be back to what he was essentially. So, and they've not got a horrendous cast behind it. ETN is going to be an interesting to look at over the course of time, because Bigsby's still there and is getting a bit more work. ETN has still got injury proneness, and I feel like that franchise still has question marks on him, and they'd be willing to deal him if they're having a bad season. And it feels unfathomable after last season, but it's almost pointless having a running back who's decent and then having an O-line that just lets you down anyway. And he's not the greatest blocker either. So it's bleak. My wife's a Jags fan, as I've said on the pod before, and she's pretty much given up on this season now.
Yeah, that's I feel the same way. Exactly.
Red Zone's not quite the same as it was last year.
Right, we'll go over to a team that will never have teams quicker than the way that fans quicker than the way it's going in the Chiefs in the AFC West, because what's new, the 4-0 on their quest for a first ever 3-peat. They just know how to win games, even though a lot is going against them right now. They've had a very tough 4-game schedule to open the year, perhaps the toughest part of their schedule all season. They've won all 4 games. Rashee Rice is out for the year. Isaiah Pacheco is going to miss a lot of time this season. The offensive line hasn't been amazing, and the defense lost some great players as well. And then adding all that to the fact that Patrick Mahomes has made a fair few mistakes this year, and they're still winning. It's just remarkable, isn't it?
It feels like the least convincing 4-0 that I've seen, but they know how to win tight games, and that's how you win championships and how you win multiple of them. And for those people who wanted to see the Chiefs' demise, it's not happening. And say that defense, even if it's not full of stars, it is just strong, and it knows how to adapt, and it knows how to deal with and contain an awful lot of different offenses. And it's now got to the point where they're bailing Mahomes out. Mahomes is not bailing their defense out anymore. It's very much flipped the switch. Mahomes will be desperate to have some more weapons on board, and he'll be hoping that Kelsey is now back up to speed and can be the Kelsey of old, because it's been a very odd start to the season. Whether the Taylor Swift jet set has caught up to him, I don't know. But I know that there are going to be a lot of people around the world rooting for him to be relevant now. Most of them have probably been to the Eras tour, to be fair. But they need him now. They need him more than ever because of losing Rashee Rice is there. Hollywood Brown was already out for the season. Pacheco was a decent short-range target, essentially, and he's still missing for a while. You're reliant on Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming back. Kareem Hunt's come back into the organisation, and people forget why he left, and he'll hope that it stays that way. Otherwise, you're going to have legal requirements as well. I mean, Rashee Rice had that as well. I suspect it's funny how one of the players again, putting my fantasy hat on for a second, I almost wonder if they're going to go 2 tight end sets more and Noah Gray is going to become a thing this season. And Jared Wiley is the third option, who's a rookie that they drafted this year. I feel like they've got the tight end depth, and that's been the targets they've done recently. And it's just what they've been effective at. And it's almost a case of having to go back to that. But Andy Reid will always find different ways to win, even if it is by 3 points each time, just kicking the last field goal to win the game. And unfortunately for the rest of the league, they're just very good at it.
Yeah, and I think I had Liam on a podcast last week, and he was saying that the reason why Kelsey's production's gone down is because all the routes that he used to run, the little make your own routes, they were run by Rashee Rice. Now, so it's almost the offense now is going through Rice. Now Rice is out. Obviously, we saw it in the game last week where Kelsey had a big impact. I think now we're going to start to see a lot of Travis Kelsey as previous because, again, all of those balls are now going to go back to him rather than Rashee Rice. So I think we're going to see that, certainly. But I'll go over to the Raiders now, start them because they are in second place in the division. The rest of the division is 2-2. And to be fair to them, they have won every one-score game they've been a part of. They won the 2 hardest games on their schedule. The only problem is they've also been beaten convincingly by the Chargers and the Panthers. They aren't sure who their best quarterback is as well. They can't run the football whatsoever. And now they're sending Devontae Adams out of the building as well, by the sounds of things. Weird team, the Raiders, aren't
they? A lot of business decisions. An awful lot of business decisions. It's a team that, considering you think of the Raiders and you think, well, there's a team that has a history and an identity, and you feel like right now they are in an identity crisis in that they don't know what they want to do in terms of offense. They don't know who they even want as their personnel anymore. They don't know how much they want it. They looked absolutely fantastic against the Ravens and then looked abysmal against the Panthers. It's very Jekyll and Hyde, and I think the move to take Adams out of the equation, I have to admit, I think it's the right decision because he can be a disruptive factor. And as we saw last season, when you take out a disruptive factor, you can create some harmony. But they are going to have, I think it's signaled the fact that they're not really, thinking about contending this year. They're not necessarily going to look to, even think about looking at the Chiefs yet. They're still in the rebuild mode. It's a shame for the likes of Max Crosby because I think he could be, if he asked for a trade and went to a competing team, he could be a missing piece for a lot of teams. I just have visions of him and the Lions with
Aiden Hutchinson.
I don't know. I always get them too mixed up. It's a long name with a H, so apologies. But them two together would be like deadly.
Yeah, and I think with the Raiders, I think they're going to be in the quarterback market this offseason. Whether that's someone in the draft, I think I could just see like Shador Sanders being Raiders quarterback. I think it just with obviously all the links and everything, and Vegas, and I think Dion might want his son to play that, that kind of thing. Just to see something like that happening, but we'll see. But again, they don't know who their best quarterback is. I think they're going to switch between Minshew and O'Connell a couple of times this season, and but they feel like they're building a bit of a culture there. They can win close games sometimes. We've seen them under Antonio Pierce the last couple of years have the ability to beat anyone on their day. I think they're just not good enough to beat a lot of teams. I think that's just the way it is.
Their identity is any given Sunday.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Okay. We'll go over to the Broncos now. They play the Raiders this week, so at least one of them is going to be 3-2. This time last year, they were getting put 70 up against Miami, and now their defense is number 2 in the league. So you're starting to see some nice play out of rookie quarterback Bo Nix as well, considering the talent around him. They also have PFF's best special teams unit so far as well. Obviously, if you're good special teams, that's going to certainly help. They've done a lot of punts inside the 5-yard line this season. There's a lot to be excited about if you're a Broncos fan, isn't there, right now?
A lot more than you were expecting. I think a lot of people were thinking, bottom dwelling and absolutely abysmal. But Bo Nix has not been bad, and that defense is, as you say, one of the better ones in the league. And Patrick Surtain is kind of getting a bit of a reputation for himself as being a wide receiver 1 killer. I think the only one that sort of sticks out as he struggled with was Pickens, and that was only because he kept the stat sheet down, but I still think there was a few calls in that game that were very erroneous, and he was beaten twice on phantom holding calls. Not bitter at all. However, it's still very much a work in progress, but the shoots are there that their turnaround is going to be a lot quicker than what we thought. And I feel like the run game still needs an awful lot of work. I have a feeling that they may be pinning an awful lot of their future hopes on how good Audric Estime looks when he comes into the fray. He's still on injured reserve at the minute. But I think Javonte Williams' days are numbered. Jaleel McLaughlin's not there. Tyler Bidet, it was a shame what happened to him the other week because he looked like he was going to get a shot, and then sadly, whatever happened on the sideline has knocked him out of it for a little while. But you just feel like they're just going to build up a few more offensive weapons. They seem to have a few things that a lot of other teams, that are wanting to be contenders would die for. Number 1 corner and 2 lines that are, pretty competent in all fairness, and a quarterback that's young and, maneuverable and seemingly, has some accuracy. Okay, last week he only threw for 60-odd yards? But I think, again, that was a bit of defense scheming against him. Also,
the weather was terrible. There's a reason why that game was 10-9, because the weather was horrific.
It was rank. But I think they will surprise. Again, they have the luxury of being in a division with the Chiefs. No one expects them to win the division. I don't think anyone expects them anywhere near the wildcard spots. They can just gradually gain the experience and improve and wait for the day that the Chiefs fall apart, which could... you never know with this league. Could happen any time. They just want to be there ready to pounce, I think.
Yeah, 2 good wins against the Jets and the Bucks. Certainly, they can, like the Raiders, they can beat everyone. But I think they're going in the right direction, and I don't think about the Raiders in the same way. I think that's the way I do. And then the Chargers, we'll finish off with them. They had a great start to the season by manhandling the Raiders and the Panthers, but I've scored just 10 points in both the last 2 games against better defenses. Jim Harbaugh wanted a run-first team. It's kind of working, to be fair, especially with what obviously I think it's been very J.K. Dobbins heavy, but he's playing well. And Jesse Minter's defense has been a lot better than some people thought, because that defense was absolutely terrible under Brandon Staley. But now it's sort of around the middle of the league, which is really good. And then Joey Bosa's missed games as well. So when Bosa comes back, then they're something to work on for the Chargers. Again, the only issue for them has been injuries. It's obviously both sides of the ball, but especially the offense. The offensive line's been banged up all year, and then because of that, then that was a strong point of the offense, the offensive line going into the season, and then because of that, the offensive line getting banged up. Now just Herbert's being banged up, and he's not been great when he has been healthy, especially when training the last 2 games. Like, my big criticism of Herbert is the fact that when training, he's not a great quarterback. I wouldn't trust him with the game on the line. I think I'd rather have someone like Baker Mayfield with the game on the line, if I'm being honest. But Herbert with a run game with on script with if they start the game well, nothing the Chargers can win the game. Problem is because it's not been thrown in the last couple of games, and it's getting more and more banged up. That's the reason why they've lost the last two. That's not good, but at least the Chargers, they're going in the right direction, you could say.
There's certain, again, I can see the pathway to them being good, but I had my concerns at the beginning of the season, and even to the point when the coaching hire was made and the team was sort of being structured and built together, that it was a team that was very, very clearly run first. And J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards has flat to deceive. J.K. Dobbins has been electric, but Herbert's not a rushing quarterback, so you are very much reliant on those two guys to be able to do a lot of the work. You completely decimated the receiving core, and you're relying on Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, who was, last season he was drop central, and now you're sort of, relying on him as your wide receiver too. So you've not got an awful lot of confidence in your, passing weapons if you're Justin Herbert. Obviously, he's had all of his injury troubles as well. It was like, if the run game falls apart, or if you are trailing in a game, what are you going to do about it? And there's been signs in games this season where they've been behind and they've still just stuck with the run, and just the clock's beaten them because they just don't have the air it out plan B or C. And I had that feeling at the beginning of the season, it's just come to fruition. And until they either can develop the likes of McConkey and Johnston to becoming, much more effective and have Herbert's efficiency levels rise massively, or getting to be able to have the confidence to be able to move out the pocket more and use his legs, I get the feeling that they're just going to get found out too early, and that as long as teams make a fast start against them, they're going to win. And there's only so much your defense can really do in that scenario, even with Joey Bosa. And it's one of those where I feel like an identity has been pushed too hard. It's almost like the opposite of the Raiders, in fairness, that if they kind of scaled that back a little bit, the next sort of off season, what they do in the draft and what they do in free agency next year could be very telling, in my opinion, because I think that window might actually define what their trajectory is going forward for the next few years.
Yeah, they're certainly an interesting team to watch as the season goes on, as they get healthier. You'd like to think they get healthier, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, they're with Jim Harbaugh being there, they're certainly going to be in the media limelight. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of years. Right, now let's get on to the end of the pod. As always, we always end the podcast by picking the games against the spread for the next week. So obviously next week, the week going on is week 5. We've done the Vikings-Jets game. We both picked the Vikings to cover the 2.5 point spread. Now we'll go on to the early window. We'll start with Chicago. The Bears are 3.5 point favourites at home to the Panthers. Now I'm going for the Panthers to cover here because the Bears offense I'm not very confident in at all. Especially for fantasy purposes, they're terrible. Just if you have a Bears receiver, I feel sorry for you, to be fair, because the way the Panthers defense is been pretty, it's been better than it was last year, and they've found something under Andy Dalton. So I'm going to pick the Panthers to cover. Because I'm just not confident in the Bears. They probably should win, and they might win, but I think it'll be very close. So yeah, give me the Panthers to cover.
I'm hoping I haven't got caught up in the hype too much, but I've gone Panthers as well, and I actually think they win the game even without the spread, to be honest. And I see the shoots that maybe Bryce Young was the problem, and the resurgence of Dalton is real. Granted, they have lost one or two of their key defensive pieces this last week, so I'm hoping that doesn't sort of come back to bite them, and that's sort of the unknown in this scenario. But the Panthers don't seem as lackluster and as poor as they looked for the first 2 weeks of the season. So, I'm easily going Panthers on this one.
Awesome. Right, big game in the AFC North next. The one of the Bengals hosted 2-2 Ravens. The Ravens are 2.5 point favourites on the road. I'm going to go with the home team here. just because I feel like the Bengals really need this win. And I think, like with the Ravens last week, I think they really need this win. And it may come back to bite me because the Ravens just really good running, and obviously the Bengals can't stop the run. But in single games where you really need to win, Lou Anarumo really cooks up something different, and I think that might be the case in this one. So I'm gonna take the Bengals within 2, obviously 2.5 point spread, but I'm not confident in that one.
Yeah, I'm going the other side of it. I am going for the Ravens, and I'm not necessarily convinced it's going to be a blowout. I was surprised it was only 2.5, if I'm being honest, and that was kind of a lot of the reason why I went for the Ravens. But it's at 2-2, the Ravens need it still as well. They're still, getting over the fact that they lost to the Raiders, and I think they've got a bit of a point to prove even still until that record is looking healthier. And for as long as they are behind the Steelers, they are going to want to put that extra effort in to win the game to get back ahead of them. So I'm going to stay with status quo, and the better team wins in the Ravens, and by enough.
There we are. Another monster game in the early window sees the Texans host the Bills. The Bills are 1.5. Sorry, no, the Bills are 1.5 point underdogs. The Texans are 1.5 point favourites at home. I'm gonna pick the Bills because 1.5 point spread literally is just a coin flip. But also I've waxed lyrical this week about them. I just think they're built to win games like this, and I'm not sure the Texans are yet. So we'll see. This could be the game where the Texans announce themselves on the league's stage. But the team that have been most impressive so far are the Bills. So they are dogs, but just by 1.5 points. So I'm going to pick the Bills.
I've gone contrarian and gone Texans in that I think it's, I don't want to say a get-right game for a team that's 3-1, but I feel like things will click together. The Bills, it should be a tight game, but you get the feeling that one side or the other is probably going to, run away a little bit. And I almost have more faith in the Texans running away than the Bills in some respects. And when it's these tight games like this, I always like going for the underdog slightly, taking the extra point on the spread. More as a betting theme than anything. And it could genuinely be a game that is won by a point. But at the same time, I if a team is going to blow out the other, I would see it more being the Texans than the Bills. So I'm going to stick with it. But again, this is the one where I have the least confidence as well.
Yeah, I'll go over to the AFC South now. We'll stick in the AFC South, obviously, because the Texans been in the AFC South too. We've got a huge game for both the Colts and the Jags. The Jags are the home team, and they're favoured by 2.5 points. This one's hard to pick as well because both teams have been terrible this season. Both defenses have been terrible. I think the Jags' offense is just a better offense, and that might be the difference in this game. So I'm going to pick the Jags to cover that 2.5 point spread. But again, I'm not confident in that one.
I wish I knew who was starting quarterback for the Colts, because if it's Flacco, Colts absolutely is my pick. With Richardson, the confidence level drops massively. I've still picked the Colts partly because I think they might play Flacco, and even if they play Richardson, he might not be in the game very long because he'll still find a way of injuring himself. And again, I'll go for the underdog when it's quite close like this, and just the Jags have had such a rough start. You feel like it should be the get-right game because this is the coach is under threat, watch them win to prolong the agony kind of thing. It's like the best thing for the Jags now will be that they lose and fire everyone off the back of it. They're left, I would say left on the bus, but they're at home, aren't they? Not given the return ticket or whatever. The car's been removed from the car park. But narrative says that, but I'm still going to go for the Colts anyway.
We'll go over to Foxborough now, with the Patriots host the Dolphins in an all AFC East tie. Both teams 1-3. The Patriots are home underdogs, which really surprised me with the way this Dolphins team has looked this season. So I'm gonna pick the Patriots to upset the Dolphins, against the spread. But I think the Patriots win this game, like maybe even by 2 scores, if I'm being honest. So I'm quite confident in this pick.
I think the line's moved because when I put it on, Miami were the underdogs when I was doing my research. 1.5.
I think it did move. It moved when Huntley was announced as the starter for this week.
That would make sense. Yeah, I did mine before then. either way, I'm still going Dolphins. Not necessarily because I have, faith in them. It just feels like one of those, not necessarily a trap game, but it feels like one of those where the Dolphins will end up doing just enough when you feel like they are completely rock bottom. There will be the shoots of, maybe this isn't so bad as it seems, but then you remember that it's the Patriots, and they will sort of remember that maybe we need to think about, losing a few and getting the stronger draft picks to make the team better. Not necessarily saying tanking, but there may be some different business decisions being made, but not necessarily by the players. So I can kind of see Miami desperately trying to cling on hard enough that when Tua is back, they have a chance of bringing their plan A back out into action. They just need to not be out of it. So I think the effort's going to be there, but I don't see this being high scoring either.
Yeah, I'm not excited to watch this game whatsoever.
The over 34.
Yeah, and do you know what, the maddest thing is, this game was the one that Burkhardt and Brady were meant to do for Fox, but it's been moved. It's been changed. They're doing the Arizona San Francisco game now. But imagine Tom Brady calling that game. That would have been fun.
That would have been painful for him.
Yeah, I know. that would have been for the rest of the NFL. That not really pictures of Bucs fans watching Brady watch that game would have been entertainment for sure.
Brilliant.
But the final game in the early window sees Washington host the Browns. Washington are favored by 3.5 points, 3-1 on the year, of course. I'm going to pick them to cover that spread. Again, tough test for them with the Browns defense, but the Browns offense, even though it looked okay last week, that offensive line is terrible. And the Commanders, they're due a get-right game for their defensive line. Interior especially, got some great players on the interior. And Watson has struggled, with pressure at the middle. That's why he's scrambling so much this year compared to previous years. So I think this is going to be a bad matchup for them. So I'm going to pick the Commanders to cover.
I've gone Commanders comfortably as well, because I think their offense is just so electric that it doesn't, you have to have a similarly electric offense to be able to keep up with them. And the Browns don't. And no matter how good their defense looks, I just think there could be another sort of 30 to 40 points put up by the Commanders on their own. And I don't see the Browns having the ability to get past 30.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to start the late window with that Raiders-Broncos game. The Broncos are favored by 2.5, and I'm going to pick them to cover that spread just because I feel like their defense can win them games. It won in the game against the Jets. I'd probably say they've got the best quarterback, I'd probably say, with the way Bo's looked the last 2 weeks. But again, this one's a division game, so anything can happen. But I'm going to pick the Broncos to cover that spread.
Ditto. And if anything, this is probably the one I felt the most confident programming in that, of all the turmoil that has been going on with the Raiders this last week, all of the social media stuff, all of the business decisions, all of the Devontae Adams talk, it's either going to be one of those where they put that all to one side, concentrate on the football, and end up getting a win against a division rival, or, the truth is going to come out of the woodwork and the Broncos are going to end up, I wouldn't say walking over them. I don't think they've got the ability to completely trounce them, but certainly dispatch them comfortably. So, Broncos easily for me this time.
We'll go over to the NFC West, where the Niners host the Cardinals. The Niners are 7.5 point favourites in this one, a massive spread. So I'm going to pick the Cardinals to come within 7 because I like the Cardinals anyway. The Niners are banged up as it is. And I feel like the Cardinals are a very well coached team, and against a very injured team, they played a really close game last year. The Niners and the Cardinals did as well. So I think history tells us that this one's going to be closer than that 7.5 point spread. So I'm going to pick the Cardinals to cover.
Absolute ditto. Repeat everything you said. I'm going Cardinals. Same reason, same logic. Next.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we'll go over to Seattle now. The Seahawks hosting the Giants. Now, Malik Neighbors has just been confirmed as out in this game, which this spread is going to go bigger throughout the weekend. So if it is still 5.5 wherever you bet, I'd probably say bet the Seahawks to win this game right now. As right in front of me, it does say it is 5.5 points still. So yeah, give me Seattle by 6. They walk this game because the Giants, without Malik Neighbors, do not feel with confidence whatsoever in offense.
Yeah, I'd say I would be intrigued as to what this ends up at come match start. It's an easy Seahawks at 5.5, 6.5, probably even 7.5 at this point. That the Seahawks have actually been one of the teams that have impressed me quite a bit this season, and obviously other division. But it's a team that has a defense that seems to be coming back to being strong, and an offense that has multiple ways of winning, a quarterback that's more than competent, a bunch of wide receivers that are all quality, and a running back room that has versatility. Yeah. Everything the Giants wish they had.
Yeah, I love that defense especially. So I'm really confident about that pick. And the final game in the late window sees the Packers go to LA as opposed to the Rams. The Packers are favoured by 3.5 points on the road. Now the Rams obviously don't really have that much of a home field advantage because they don't really get many fans there. It's normally filled with away fans. So you can sort of you can sort of say there's no real home advantage there. This is an interesting one, but the Rams are just so banged up that I'm gonna pick the Packers to cover that 3.5 point spread on the road.
Yeah, with a fit Jordan Love, even with Watson missing, I think the rest of that Packers team is just too strong. And yeah, the Rams are just so banged up at the moment. They're doing well to stay in games as much as they have, given the losses on O-line and in the receiving room as well. And I do hope for their sake that John Whittington has a really good game this week, because I loved him in preseason, and I feel like I'd love to see him do almost like a Nakua repeat. But I still see the Packers, running this out comfortably.
Yeah, I feel like with all the leagues I'm in, I get a new notification every day saying that someone's picked up John Whittington, or someone's. Yeah, so it's certainly going to be interesting to see how he fares. Then we'll go over to the primetime games. There's only 2 this week, only one Monday Night Football game. We'll start with your Steelers, James. They host the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, favoured by 1.5 points, and I'm going to pick them to win the game and obviously cover that spread.
Forever the eternal pessimist, I've gone for the Cowboys and a bit of a get right motion. I have to admit, if you'd have asked me in sort of pre-season, I'd have said, well, the over-under is going to be Dallas by about 4 or 5 probably, and it'll be a low-scoring game. Still might be low-scoring, but I just feel like under the lights against the team that is trying to prove a point, because they've kind of been maligned again this season, and there is a lot that needs to get right. They have been a run funnel, and the Steelers' weakness this season probably has been the run. So you're relying on Justin Fields pretty much beating them on his own, both running through them and passing it through to Pickens. And I feel like it's maybe going to be too much of an ask. But the part of me thinks that that's me wanting to bet against my team so that I can enjoy the win or enjoy the victory lap of being right. So you've got to take that one with a grain of salt. But I've put the Cowboys on the list anyway.
Yeah, I just don't feel confident with the Cowboys, especially with the way they run the football. And your pass defense is really good. So
yeah.
That's just what
been the case in the recent years.
Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking of. Like, if you can't stop the run, if you can't run the ball, the Dallas just pass the ball all the time, and I feel like it's just not a great matchup for them. So I'm really confident the Steelers are going to win this one, actually. And we'll finish off with Monday Night Football. The 4-0 Chiefs host the 2-2 Saints. With the way the Saints will start the season, this is going to be a very, very fun game. The Chiefs are favoured by 5.5 points. It's quite a big spread with the amount of injuries they have, and the way the Saints have looked. So I'm going to go for the Saints to cover that 5.5 point spread. I feel bad picking against the Chiefs because I just know they win these games, but the Falcons game was a close game before, and I feel like they're probably due a loss as it stands. And if the Saints look like they did at the start of the season, even last week, they probably still have a chance with with the way the amount of Chiefs players that are banged up and everything. So I think this will be a really entertaining game. I'm looking forward to watching this one. I'll probably stay up for this game as well, to be fair. But yeah, I'm going to pick the Saints to cover that 5.5 points, because I'm just not confident with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm going Saints as well, but I think the Chiefs win the game, but I think they win it by less than 5. It's kind of the way the Chiefs have been going about their business in recent weeks and seasons is we'll just keep it close and win it at the death. And a field goal is only worth 3 points. So if you're tied at the end or if you're behind, you're not going to win by 5+ points. I don't think it's going to be a walk-off touchdown win situation with them. It's very much building up to field goal winning the game or field goal putting it just about out of sight. So I think the Saints will be able to keep it within that 5-point window and still lose. It's almost a very different kind of bet that it will be in the spread, so to speak. But yeah, I'm going Saints to cover that. Yeah,
absolutely. Saints within 5. And that's it. There you go. That's all done. That's the podcast done. A bit of a long one this week, but we want to get as much in as possible because it is the first London game week. So thank you for joining us on the podcast. I've been Sam. He's been James. It's been the Full 10 Yards NFL Podcast. And I will see you with all the reaction from the first London game.